You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis. I'm the host of BioTalk. On this edition of BioTalk, we have the opportunity to meet one of my favorite people in the BioHealth Capital Region. She keeps smiling every time I say that. It's Rachel King, CEO and co-founder of GlycoMimetics, Inc., publicly traded company who has evolved in this region and become very successful. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Let's talk a little bit about you and your background first, because I'm sure the listeners are very interested in how did Rachel get to become a public company CEO in a very male-dominated biotechnology industry?
Well, where to begin with that? I guess I would begin, since we're talking about science, and the fact that I've always loved biology. And I was one of those kids when I was growing up. I had a microscope and a dissecting kit at home. We lived in Ohio at the time, and I loved being in the country, in the woods, and following biology. So I think for me, the core of what I've done and what I've enjoyed doing is really that love of science and the love of biology, even though I did not train as a scientist, and I don't want to claim that, but I think to really love that aspect of what we do is an important cornerstone. So when I was in college, I had originally thought I might go to medical school, but I ended up going into other things and instead being a French major. I've also always had a great love of languages. But I was very fortunate, I think, in my first job out of college when I was working at Bain & Company, a consulting firm, that I was assigned to a case team that was working for one of the early biotech companies that had partnered with a big pharma company that was a Bain client. And it gave me the first window into being able to think that maybe there was a way to combine an interest in science and an interest in business. And since then, I've done a number of things over the course of the years, which we can talk about if you want to. But I think I would say that as a cornerstone, that was really the basis.
So beyond Bain, what was the track between Bain to today?
Well, so after Bain, I went to business school and married my husband. We've been married for over 30 years now. Hard to believe it's been that many years, but we're happy to celebrate that recently. And we actually went to China for a year when we were first married, right when I graduated, building on, as I said, that interest I had in languages and his interest in being in the Far East also. When we came back from China, I had my first job at a biotech company, which was Alza, which was out in Palo Alto, California. John was at Stanford Business School at the time. And so we settled there, and that was the first time I really had a chance to begin to, in the workplace, combine the business interest with the science. When we decided to move back east, at that point I felt I really wanted to try to be in a startup company. And so we were interviewing for opportunities. We actually looked at 3 places. We looked at the Washington area, including Baltimore, because we loved Baltimore too. We looked in Boston, and we looked in Pittsburgh, which is where John's from, and not far from Buffalo, where my family was. So
that's where I'm from, too.
Oh, are you really? I didn't know that.
Is he a Steeler fan?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh. We have terrible towels in our house in case we need them.
How about penguins? You like penguins too?
Penguins too,
okay,
yeah.
Great.
Anyway, within about a week of each other, we both got offers here in Maryland and came here. And at that time, I joined Genetic Therapy, which was a startup. I was the about 12th or 13th employee. Jim Barrett was the CEO. And it was interesting. I remember sitting down with Jim during the interview process and telling him how enthusiastic I was to be in a startup. And I think he wanted to be sure that I had a clear-eyed sense of what this might require. And he looked at me and he said, let me just tell you, you might come to work one day and the roof might be leaking, and that might be your problem. And I said, fine, sign me up, I'll do it. And it turned out to be a wonderful opportunity. We went through the first gene therapy trials that were ever approved. And I had a number of opportunities over the years as GTI grew and went public and partnered with Novartis and eventually was bought by Novartis. And then when Jim left, after the company had been sold, Novartis named me as the CEO. So at that time, we had about a little over 200 employees, and so I ran it as a division. Let me think. That was about 1997. Yes, that's about right. And then I stayed in Novartis, ran that for a few more years, then went into Novartis Corporate. I had become very interested in the interactions between the public and complicated science. And gene therapy, unfortunately, is a good example of where you need public support, but the public doesn't really understand what you're trying to do. And there was a tragedy with a patient death at University of Pennsylvania that really set the field back around that time. And I was very interested in that interface. Novartis then had a need for someone to run their Washington office and corporate communications for the U.S., and so I went into that position, which was also very interesting. But after a few years of that, I wanted to go back and do something more in the smaller company environment. I went and networked around and went back to NEA, and they offered me a chance to go there as an entrepreneur in residence. And at that time, Jim had gone back to NEA as a new partner. They had just raised their first $1 billion fund, and they were increasing the number of people who had biotech backgrounds. So I went there as an EIR, and out of that started GlycoMimetics.
Wow, that's amazing. As you know, we both love EIRs.
Yes,
We have 6 EIRs, and you were one of the early EIRs within the BioHealth Capital Region at NEA. And also that you're saying their first $1 billion fund.
That was when NEA had raised their first $1 billion fund.
Yeah. And for people who don't know NEA, it's New Enterprise Associates, which is one of the largest venture capital firms in the world with, I think, $18 to $20 billion under management right now. And then we're going to learn a little bit about their involvement with you, right? So what were your duties as an EIR with NEA?
Well, there were a couple of, I think, general categories of things. I was essentially Jim's right-hand person to help do deal analysis. That was part of the job, and to help due diligence on deals and anything that he wanted to have run down to just do whatever needed to be done to assist him, which was a wonderful opportunity to see the deal flow at NEA. And what a great quality organization they are. I mean, I can't say enough good things about the people and the process, and they were just an incredible group. And I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity and for their support of the company. So part of it was analyze deals, and another part of it was look for a deal. So you're
an EIR on the shelf.
Yeah, looking for an opportunity to see was there a company that was interesting enough to me and to NEA that we could do that, and that I could go into it, and that they would be interested in financing. So it was an opportunity to network a lot, and that was wonderful. And in that context, I met John Mignani, who's now our Chief Science Officer, and I was really captivated by the idea that he had an idea around technology that could make this new set of targets druggable, and that could potentially open up a whole new class of molecules, which are the molecules that we call these glycomimetic molecules.
Was he approaching NEA for money at that time?
Actually, we were introduced by Eric Richmond, who you may know.
Oh, yeah.
Eric Richmond, who was at MedImmune.
Amplimune.
No, that's Michael Richmond.
Oh, Michael Richmond.
Yeah. No, so we were introduced by Eric Richmond, who was out of MedImmune and also a serial entrepreneur himself. Right. And he thought that we might be able to share this common vision, which we came to do. And so we started funding. And I will say, I thought that with NEA as the lead on our first round, I thought that was going to be easy to do, but it was hard to raise. It's been hard to raise money over the years. We had very few easy financings in the history of the company. But starting with NEA's support in that very first round, since then they've continued to support the company. Jim's still the chair now, and they're still our largest shareholder.
And what year was GlycoMimetics founded?
So we actually signed the corporate documents, I think, 2003.
Okay.
So that's been,
15 years later. Survivor.
Yep.
Right? And then you mentioned that no financing's been easy. So as you look at your financings, you were very fortunate to get a first financing from a large venture capital firm with NEA.
Yeah.
But what else have you done to raise money to bridge your growth over the 15 years?
Well, and I tell you that we were lucky to have that first financing. It was a small financing. We raised $4.5 million. And nobody would do that now. I mean, especially syndicated.
Right.
You know, we had the Novartis Venture Fund in. We had a fund in from Atlanta in Alliance Technology Ventures, Anthem Capital. So it was a syndicated roughly $4 million round with one of the biggest players in there. So that's an unusual small financing.
You say it's small, but we have a whole bunch of listeners that would die to get $4 million.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, it's small in the context, I totally get that. But it's small in the sense that with a major venture player and a syndicated round, typically now they're getting larger. But we were delighted to get it, and we've gone from venture round to venture round. We did some bridges from one round to another. There was one critical time when we were able to bring in Genzyme Ventures. We needed to bring in a new venture investor. We had some challenges. Being in sickle cell disease is our first indication. That was tough. Now sickle cell's kind of hot, and I feel like we've contributed to that, and I'm really proud of that. And also, we were in a space where we were targeting a biological mechanism called the selectins, which some people said to us, well, that's been tried and failed. And it's true. There were other companies that had tried and failed. to target that mechanism. So we've had some challenges. I feel like this last year has really been, in a lot of ways, transformative for the company, because now we're within sight of phase 3 readout from our sickle cell program, which is partnered with Pfizer. That was another way that we raised money.
Right.
And each of these has stories which we can tell if you want. And then, so we're within sight of that. We got a breakthrough therapy designation last year from the FDA, and on the heels of that, last year we raised over $100 million. And now we're sitting today with a market cap of almost $900 million. But it took us almost 15 years to get there. So it's not an easy.
Oh no.
It's not an easy short path. Of course, nobody said it was going to be easy,
right.
and Jim actually often says that. No one said it was going to be easy, and that's the truth. It hasn't
15
been.
years later, and sickle cell was your first area of emphasis, and you've expanded beyond that at this particular point in time. What else have you gotten into?
Yeah. Well, so I think I want to start to answer that by talking about the biology, because that's really where we started. And unlike a big company, if you're Pfizer, you can say to yourself strategically, I want to be in lung cancer, and then you can figure out how you want to be in lung cancer. When you're a small company, it's more a case of saying, this is what I think I can do. Based on that, what would create value? And so where we were with GlycoMimetics was that John had done a lot of work in discovery, basic biology, basic biochemistry around the selectins as a target. You can Google them and you'll find them ubiquitous in inflammation, involved in cancer, cardiovascular disease. So we felt confident that if we could have a selectin antagonist, it would be good for something. So our question was, as we began to have active molecules, what did we think we could apply them to where it would make a difference? Right. And that's what led us to sickle cell disease. And so we were thinking at that time about attributes that we were looking for in the program. So we wanted a program where we could get orphan drug and fast track status. So there was a potential regulatory, let's say, tailwind, perhaps. We wanted to find an indication where we could dose patients acutely, so we could have a fairly simple formulation. We wouldn't have to worry about complicated delivery, and an acute trial where you could potentially get an earlier readout. We tried very hard to understand also where the mechanism was not just involved in the disease, but where the pathology actually depended on it. And that's not easy to do, but we wanted to try to know that. And we wanted to find a disease where, if it was successful, it could be transformative in terms of how the patients would be treated. And that all led us to sickle cell. And what was difficult is that that's also a disease where, although there's a huge amount of need, it's one where there's also been very little successful drug development. The patient population is heterogeneous, so that makes the development more complex. And a lot of people were telling us also for psychosocial reasons not to go there, which is a real tragedy. But we felt that the biological rationale was strong. We felt we could have a transformative impact if we were successful, and I'm hoping,
and your gut said to go
that
there.
we will.
Right?
It was our gut, but it was more than our gut, and that's the point I want to make. I think successful entrepreneurs, I think sometimes in the popular literature are portrayed as kind of wild-eyed risk takers, right?
Out of the Wild West.
But I think that the successful ones are not so wild-eyed. I mean, you have to be very thoughtful. Yes, we're risk-taking, but I think we have to be very thoughtful about what we're doing, particularly because we're trying to use other people's money to do it.
I've noticed you've been very focused on a mission. Really.
Yes, yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I think that sort of differentiates those that here you have to be a little more conservative because you don't get hundreds of millions of dollars thrown at you like you might in Boston or San Francisco. So it's a little different environment here within the East Coast and the Capital Region.
Yeah, and you're not going to get too many chances to go into the clinic. Again, it's a rare company. We read about the companies that, like we read about, there's one today, I forget the name of it, just raised the first round of $250 million from some Silicon Valley billionaires. That's what you read about, but that's rare.
Right.
So we know we're not going to get a lot of chances to test something in the clinic. And we certainly lived through the case here at Glyco where we flipped over the data card, so to speak. You flip it over and you see is it positive or negative. We were lucky it was positive. But you're not going to have too many opportunities to do that because it costs so much money, it takes so much time. So you have to be very thoughtful, and that's what we have tried to be.
And you mentioned phase 3 clinicals, and you have FDA down the road. Is there any benefit to you being located within driving distance of the FDA?
It sure makes a lot of things easier. I mean, when we've had just several meetings in the past, let's say 6 months now since we got the breakthrough therapy designation, and we load the team into a van and we all drive down together. So
Right.
it's not like having to fly people across the country. So I think that certainly does make an advantage in terms of the ease of getting the people to where they need to be.
And you wish that having an NEA commissioner of the FDA would have a little more influence, but he has to be totally independent.
Yeah, I'm sure that Scott Gottlieb is going to be very judicious and thoughtful in everything that he does. I think he's going to be a great commissioner, too. I really do. And I think he's already shown he's going to be very thoughtful. I think he's not going to give anybody preferential treatment. But I think he understands the mission of public health, and he also understands how companies can support that.
Another thing that you've been successful in, which a lot of companies fail at, is that you were able to go public in 2014. Mm-hmm. We don't have hundreds of public biotechnology companies in this region. Talk a little bit about that IPO experience and what led you to go public, really.
Well, so it's a whole lot easier to raise money if you're public. That's one thing. And it's been a great advantage for us since we have been public. So I'll tell you what happened that year. So we actually, 2013 was the year that everything started to open up again for companies to go public, for biotech companies. And there were some really successful IPOs. And in early 2013, we were waiting for the data readout from our sickle cell trial. Mm-hmm. And again, just to give you a sense, I know you know this, but some of our listeners a sense of what it's like in that moment. We were literally running out of money and thinking to ourselves, if the data is negative, the company may not survive, and if the data is positive, maybe we can get public. So you're holding both of those potential outcomes in your mind and in your planning at the same time. It's emotionally challenging.
Living on the edge.
Right? You're living on the edge. But yet that's what all of our companies are doing in this space, and especially in the early days. So we were waiting for that outcome. The outcome was positive. And we then had, because we had partnered it with Pfizer, we thought it was positive. We had to say, now, does Pfizer agree? Right. And will they take it forward? They very much agreed. And so once we heard from their internal governance process that they were going to take this forward and carry it into phase 3, that was at the end of June. Right after the 4th of July, we had the org meeting for the IPO. And so the bankers, the accountants, the attorneys, and we were racing to try to get public. So we drafted the S1, and you have to go through SEC review. By the time we were ready to go, and actually the other thing that was important for us was we knew that we were going to get some of that data really fully out at ASH, and that those abstracts would publish in early November. Mm-hmm. So we ended up being on the road at the very end of October. The abstracts published right when we were getting ready to price the IPO. And as we were on the road, every day you're on the road, you're traveling all over, doing the meetings, and you get an update at the end of the day from the bankers. How is the so-called book coming together, right? So, well, we have this order, we have that order, this many shares at that price, this many shares at that price. And so as we went further and further on the road, the updates got less and less positive. Mm-hmm. And we finally got back to, it's an energizing but exhausting process. We got back to New York after, I don't know how many days on the road. And then we were sitting in the office, and the bankers came in, and they told us, we're not going to be able to get this done.
The window's closing? The
window's closing. And what they were saying is people are putting their pencils down. I'm like, pencils? You don't know who even uses pencils anymore. But that was the language they were using. Right. And so having very publicly gone out on the road, we had to pull our IPO. Right. And we were the first company of that group. There were, I think, maybe 7 or 8 were in a similar position by the end of the year. So the window had closed. So we could not get public at the end of 2013. And then we went to ASH. We presented our sickle cell data. It was chosen for Best of ASH, which I'm really proud of. Great. It was a great recognition of the quality of the phase 2 data. We had a meeting with the FDA to help clarify some of the issues around phase 3 plans. And I said to the bankers, I want to try to do it again before JP Morgan. Mm-hmm. Because we knew that there was a big backlog of companies that were going to try to go out after JP Morgan. And we were a little bit tainted, having failed to get out in 2013. So my senior team and I, we directly called the investors, which is an unusual thing to do. We got the list of all the key accounts we'd seen on the roadshow. Right. We called them up. We said, there's new information. We got to tell you about ASH. We want to tell you about the FDA meeting. So this is in the second half of December, leading into the holidays. And we were consulting with bankers all along, although they were not on the calls. We did this just as the company. And they said, well, if you could get an anchor order, we'll see if we could pull it off. So we came to work that January, or first, Tuesday in January, with our bags packed, not knowing if we were going to go to New York or not. And we got a call at noon, and they said, we got an anchor order.
Oh,
we think
super.
we can do it.
That's great.
So we went to New York, we marketed for 2 more days,
Right.
and we closed. And that's why we have this nice big sign in our lobby that says, it's this on the NASDAQ marquee in Times Square, it says, "Welcome GlycoMimetics, first IPO of 2014.
Yeah.
And so people look at that and they say, oh, that's really cool. And I says, yes, but
Yeah.
it was not easy.
I
Not easy to get
guarantee
there.
It wasn't. Now that you've been through that cycle and you've done a secondary and raised some additional money, and the company's progressing through clinicals right now, as you grow like that and you've got financing, one of the most important things is to get the talent to keep that science progressing as you grow. And tell me a little bit about how you've grown your team and how this region has been to either cultivate or recruit people for your company.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to Rachel King again, by the way, the CEO of GlycoMimetics.
Thank you. So we've been very lucky to have a strong and stable team here. And we've also been lucky to have low turnover. And one of the things that we've been very careful to do also is to grow our internal headcount fairly slowly, slower than some of the other companies that you've seen in the area. And in part, that's because we've recognized that financing is always a challenge, and certainly historically has felt more kind of hand to mouth than it has in the past year. But I think in terms of this area, we do have, I think, wonderful things to offer in terms of quality of life. I love living in Maryland, and I think the D.C. region is great as a place to live and raise our kids. It's true, however, that we have often had to look outside of the area to get people. We, particularly on the technical side, sometimes we've brought people in from quite far away. I think as we look, if we're fortunate enough to commercialize this drug, our leukemia drug, which I hope we will be able to, then I think to build that commercial staff, we're going to probably have to also look outside the region. So I anticipate that we'll be continuing to hopefully recruit more people to the area, but I think we've got a lot to offer in terms of Maryland.
Basically, you talk about the quality of life, and it sounds like with low turnover, the people you've recruited here like it once they get to the region.
Well, yeah, and in some cases, from our senior team perspective, let's say 5 senior executives, I would say 4 of us lived here, actually, when they were recruited to the company, and the 5th came to us from, I think he was in Pennsylvania at the time, but from Maryland.
Oh, great.
And so
Okay.
viewed it as an opportunity to get back.
So we're basically saying we have the talent and
Yeah.
we have the ability to grow our own
Yeah.
companies within our own region.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
which is
And
great.
I'm confident we'll
Right.
be able to continue to do that.
Another thing that I've grown to appreciate about you is that even while you're trying to grow a challenging biotechnology business and get a product through clinicals and into the market, you also have been a spokesman for the industry. And you took on a role as the industry leader for bio for 2 years?
As the board chair, yeah.
As the board chair. And that was, 15, 16?
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's quite an honor because you followed a great leader. Your predecessor was Tom Watkins.
Yes, absolutely.
From Human Genome
Yeah.
Sciences. So it's nice to know that the most prestigious industry organization for bio has had 4 continuous years of a Maryland leader.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, no, and Tom was great. Those are big shoes to fill.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about what your role was and what was involved in being the chair of a large industry organization.
Yeah. Well, I should say to start, I think bio is a wonderful organization in terms of the support it can provide to companies like ours. And we have smaller companies like GlycoMimetics, we have larger companies like Human Genome Science, or even Pfizer, Merck, and others that are also involved. So it's an opportunity to, as a participant on the board, it's an opportunity to network with a lot of key industry people that are good to know. It's also a learning opportunity because we talk about the key policy issues that are affecting all of us, and it's an opportunity, I think, to have influence on areas that are important. I am firmly convinced, and we have many examples, that public policy really does affect what we do and what we're able to do. And the opportunity to work with bio to affect that policy, to change that policy, establish policies that are going to be beneficial, is critical. And so I've been grateful to have an opportunity to be part of that. And it's also been a lot of fun. It's interesting. I mentioned briefly that I had worked at the Novartis,
Right.
and I ran the Washington office, which was a chance earlier in my career to begin to appreciate the impact of policy on our industry. And so in some ways I've kind of come back to that again through the work at bio. And the role as board chair, I've been on the board for all those years, and I'm still on the board. But as the chair, I was chair also of the emerging companies section, which is the smaller companies group, and then chair of the full board. And in that role, it's an opportunity again to build consensus around key policy matters, to try to rally the industry leaders to help lobby around key policy issues, and to be in that role a spokesman for some of the key policy initiatives.
And I'm patient and persistent just like you. And now that you've stepped down as the chair of Bio, there's another bio organization within the region that's been trying to get you to be a board member for many years.
Which I've been a great admirer of also for many years.
And I'm not going to give up. And I'm not going to ask you on the show today.
Okay, good. Thank you.
we're going to continue to work on that, okay? Let's talk a little bit about what your goals are now. You haven't fulfilled everything that you'd like to with Glyco at this point. I know you have goals there, but what are your personal goals that you'd like to achieve over the next 5 to 10 years?
Personal goals. I would like to continue to lead a fulfilling, interesting life.
Okay.
And I think Glyco has certainly been part of that.
Right. And so Glyco's a part of that, right? And trying to keep that work-life balance that's necessary and tough, because I used to have a board member, and I was running a public company, and he'd call me every Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, and he wouldn't say, what great happened this week. He'd say, what are you losing sleep over? He always wants to know what's wrong, not what all the good things were happening. I don't know if you have board members like that, but do you have things you're losing sleep over now?
There's always things that worry me. I'm lucky I don't actually lose a lot of sleep over work.
Right
so
now.
That's good.
That's good.
But I mean, certainly there are the things that are outside of our control, and of course much of life is outside of our control, really. I hope we're making good decisions. I hope we're thoughtfully using the resources that we have. And then once we make the good decisions, I hope that we're properly executing them and implementing them. I guess I worry most about wanting to be sure that we're able to continue what we're doing. So I'm concerned about ongoing issues around financing. I'm always concerned about how the data is going to read out. You know, when you're coming up to a data readout, you've put so much into something. When you do have to finally see, is it, red or green? How are you going to get the right readout? And are we managing the company in a way that builds on the teamwork and shows integrity and delivers quality?
And after almost 15 years, I guess, building what you've built, if you had to go back and do anything differently over these 15 years, and you had the ability to change anything, what would you tell the aspiring entrepreneurs and women that are involved in the biotechnology industry, or the men or anybody, about what you would do differently?
So that's a hard question for me to answer. And the reason is not because I feel like I've done everything so well, because there's certainly things I could have done better. But where I sit today, I'm so happy about the outcome that we've had. And I've been really grateful to enjoy the work as I have these years. So now, at the moment, I feel good about where we are. So somehow, by good choices and by good luck, we've gotten to where we are, and I'm grateful for that. So I don't want to change.
You don't want to change anything, right?
But whether we could have done things faster, whether we could have done things better along the way, and I guess you don't know what would have happened if we had chosen a different clinical indication, or if we had made different decisions about use of resources at different times. We don't know what the alternative outcome could have been. Maybe it could have been better, but I am really happy with the outcome that we've been able to achieve so far. Actually, it's funny. On that point, I was saying something to my husband recently, and I said something like, "Man, I just hope it all works out," and just in a general sense. And he paused and he said, I think it really already has.
It already has, right?
It already has.
To achieve what you have achieved.
And I mean, I hope we deliver drugs that are successful. I hope we deliver drugs that make a difference in people's lives. And then we continue to give returns on these investors who have given us their money and their confidence. So I really hope we can continue to do that. But I also think that we have contributed to the field. We've advanced the science. We've advanced the clinical science. And I think we've built a community here at the company where I hope people like coming to work. I hope that it's meaningful to them. Certainly for me, I think it's been a meaningful, wonderful way to spend these past 15 years, and I'm really grateful for it. So in that sense, it has worked out.
You'd be a great CEO to work for. Yeah. Last thing I'm going to ask you is that you've been in this region for quite a while now, trying to grow a very difficult company, okay?
Yeah.
Any biotechnology company is difficult. How do you believe the BioHealth Capital Region, as we're referring to it now, has evolved and changed And do you see promise for the future compared to where you were 15 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. It's been a wonderful evolution to see and to be part of. And one of the things that I think is a mark of health is to see the progeny companies that are now starting up with people who have been at previously successful companies. So that's very encouraging to see. Sitting where we are right now, I can look out one window and see one successful company to my left and another one, Regenx Bio to my right.
Regenx Bio, right. Yeah.
And so sitting right here in this strip of buildings, this is where Tiger, Institute for Genomics Research, actually started.
Right.
So I think we can just look around us and see excellent roots, which were innovative and really just cutting edge at the time. And now people and new companies that are, I think, cutting edge in our time. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly encouraging. And we're beginning to see cross-fertilization in other ways. I'm happy that the CEO of Macrogenics, Scott Koenig, recently joined my board. And I think that's another...
It's an incestual industry, isn't it?
Well, it's a sign of health that we feel that we can look as close as next door to get the quality person that I think can really help us.
You don't have to come from California or Boston. Right?
Yeah,
that
so
is
I
refreshing.
think so I certainly think that there's been a tremendous amount of progress, and I'm sure that there's going to continue to be.
Well, I want to thank you for being a great leader within the industry and helping other aspiring entrepreneurs. I know you speak whenever you're asked to speak. You'll meet with people whenever people ask to meet with you, and that's very much appreciated.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for the chance to be on the podcast.
You're welcome. And this has been a great podcast with Rachel King, the co-founder and CEO of GlycoMimetics. Rachel, good luck to you in the future.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.